Hello, welcome to Jason Cabinet's Experience. I'm a retired U.S. Army officer and CEO founder of Cabinet HR. At Cabinet HR, we provide HR to companies with 40 and under people by combining a tech platform with an HR business partner. Before we get into today's talk, I want to share a few things that might help you. Over the past few years, I've had more than 300 conversations with interesting people from various backgrounds. I pulled the best lessons from these in the 7 free ebooks you can grab at buildcabinehr.com/ebooks or the QR code on the screen. They cover leadership, startup struggles, growth, and training shaping the future among a few. These insights are also fueling how we're building Cabinet HR. We've also started the Builders Club, a community where we help founders grow. For that, you can also click on the QR code on the screen. Now we're going to go to our conversation with Scott Alldridge. Scott, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Scott, first off, like I always start with a softball question. Can you talk about either like what you do for fun, your hobbies, or how you take care of yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. First, I like to say, really thank you for having me on today. I am inspired by your podcast. I've watched several great conversations, insightful stuff, and you're doing an amazing thing here. And yeah, I definitely star it and tell everybody out there, hey, thumbs this one because Jason's on it.
Thank you. So what are some of your hobbies?
So I love golf in my later years, I guess. I'm kind of an avid golfer, not with an awesome handicap, but I still enjoy hitting the ball. And that's very much an activity. And my family has traveled quite a bit internationally and across the state, but we do a lot of travel and really enjoy that as well. And also pretty active and involved in my church community as well. Can
you give us like a demo 101, like how handicapping works? I play golf, I kind of know what it was, but like how does handicapping work? Like how it works, like if the two players, one's like X, one's like a kind of sorry player, kind of evens them up, right?
Yeah, exactly. So looking at a course and it rates the course, there's a thing called slope, which is rating certain difficulty elements of the course without getting into technical rates, different parts of a course. And then basically your score then is balanced against whatever the rating of that particular course is to derive your handicap number. And so obviously, lower the handicap, the better the golfer you are. Higher the handicap or not, people don't track handicaps either, just, not golfers. And so anyway, that's kind of how it works. And then you play with other players. If you're in any kind of a tournament, even if it's kind of a more casual fun tournament, because I'm not good enough to play in any real tournaments. But they actually will then rate your handicap against the other players, and they'll do different balancing techniques to make it more fair for the actual tournament play, that actual round, if you will. So if you're a 14 handicap or a 12 handicap and against a 6 handicap, the expectation that 6 handicap is going to actually play that course much better to what their average is versus how well the 14 handicap played towards their average, and that will actually give them a rating or sometimes a ranking.
Sometimes when you play golf, like you go by yourself and then mix with different people. Like suppose you go to play by yourself and actually 3 different players, and 3 are like experts, and you're like kind of sorry. Do they say, hey, you can play with us, or is like 4 people you play together regardless of how the matches is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There actually is a little bit of a pecking order. It's a little unspoken because when you're just playing general recreational golf, sometimes they'll pair you up and you don't have a choice because they're trying to get foursomes as many people through the course as they can. So there are times you get paired up with really good golfers, and honestly, it can be intimidating. You try not to just get in your head. And the other thing about golf is it really is an individual sport. You're really playing against yourself, and that I really like. You're cheering. Usually, your golf buddies. You have routines sometimes. The guys you play with a lot, and you're cheering each other on the whole time.
So so when you go off, you're in golf, or you're more like me, where each holds a shot of liquor, each holds a beer, combination.
Well, there's a lot of alcohol on the course, that's for sure. But no, we're semi-serious. We have fun, so nobody's like calling every little rule out or anything like that. But we generally try to keep our score, keep it real. So yeah.
And how do you play or try to play?
I in the good weather, because I'm in Oregon, and so we have 5-6 months of decent weather. I'll play twice a week typically.
And you say active church also, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so how does like being a religious man parlay to like being a businessman? How those two interact, so to speak?
Yeah, I think they're very connected. I think, from a spiritual perspective, you're trying to be, a good person in that sense, and you're trying to be honoring in your business activities, be ethical, and I think that's really important. And those are some of the values that are very important in my church as well, in terms of, my relationship with Christ and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's really connected, very much the same. There's integrity in that, I believe.
So as a businessman, have you seen your values change over the years, or your values pretty much the same as the beginning?
Yeah, generally, I think as you get older, you mature, and as you, I think, grow in your spirituality, you mature as well. So, my belief system, nobody's perfect. We all have our battles to deal with, and we all have our, our issues, and so we try to work through that. Our faith really helps us through that.
So let's talk about something I think it's called strategic application of total control.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
is that like trademark has like a little T by it? Is that trademark?
Yeah. So total control is something that came out of kind of my IP services business, which is my last 1 year has really been my primary focus. And we started in as managed services. And then obviously over the last about 8 years, we've really led and focused with cybersecurity. It didn't used to be called cybersecurity 10 years ago. We just called it IT security. So with the development of some of the thought leadership that we did early on in the mid-2000s, I kind of launched the IT Process Institute as one of the founders with a couple of folks, Kevin Bear, Jim Kim, we were my CTO at the time. And Jim Kim was the CEO of Tripwire Software and doing a lot of enterprise things. And so there's a whole story there I could go into about the ITBI, and I will in a second. But to answer the question about total control, it really came out of that thought leadership best practices we developed, which really was founded on the IT infrastructure library, what we call ITIL. And back then, in the mid 2000s, you could Google ITIL all day long, and you would not find hardly anything on it. And really, where it came from was out of the British standard, the BS 15000, which was a set of standards and controls for IT management. And they spun the IT infrastructure library, kind of a iteration of work in progress. It wasn't formalized till they came out with ITIL 2. And that's really what kind of set us on a launch. We had people in my organization I cherry picked from my other company, my best brightest, to start the managed services group. And in doing so, there were certain things that we did that we cared about. The guys care a lot about how things were configured and how things changed, and really documenting at a layer and a level that is not real typical. And so that's what really led us on the sojourn, if you will, to say where are our best practice frameworks out there. There were early frameworks and kind of like COBIT and COSO and some of these, but they really didn't address what we call IT service management. And so in finding the ITIL, we were very excited. I mean, we ordered this ITIL 2 because it was going to make sense of everything and make it really easy for us to put into practice, all the things that we cared about or we thought we needed to improve on and mature upon. And when we opened it up, it was delivered on a early December morning. UPS dropped it. We thought it was Christmas. Like we're jumping in, ripping the 3 boxes. There's 12 books. There are books. And they all read like the telephone book. It's like the process of the process of the process. And like, man, how would you make sense of this, to really make it more not descriptive, but prescriptive? How would you prescribe to use these? And what we found was the things that we cared about, it did a really good job in ITIL 2. Because ITIL 2 is broken into service support and service delivery, 2 particular areas that make up service management. And under service support, there are 5 core basic IT processes. One's called incident management, problem management, change management, configuration management, and release management. And what we found is that if you focus on configuration management, particularly in change management and release management, those 3 together kind of as a closed process, you really get a really good benefit because you're moving from one known good state to the next known good state and following processes and doing it. And so ITIL was great. It gave a common parlance as to how we address IT. When you say configuration management and nice change management, we know what we're talking about. The other part of ITIL that's interesting is that really is a full taxonomy of how you address IT. So it's a very robust full service management approach. And going back to the ITPI, so that's when we sent out the ITPI. I said, hey, we really we're doing these things. We really came living, breathing visible ops, and we were tying it to ITIL, and that became the Visible Ops Handbook that's written, and went on to partner with some great companies, Red Hat, HP, etc. And literally bought thousands and sold thousands of books, thrown off the backs of airplanes. I joke, 300-some thousand copies. That series has been sold and continued on. And so to continue that thought, I'm running a long answer to this to total control. So what total control is, it's really the conglomeration, if you will, of some of our business practices, married to frameworks, married to visible ops, married to ITIL, and how we deliver service. And so this becomes a quality control system for IT, which is really what we started looking at way back in the early 2000s, because like in manufacturing, they've been way ahead of control process. They've had QA process forever, right? Center of Excellence for automobiles, for Toyota Catra, all these things that they did. The Deming Mill, the godfather of QA, quality assurance. So why IT? And that's really where the thought leadership started to come in. How do we start to build leadership around this? And so that's total control is really a marketing piece where we pull it all together, all of the influences of all the frameworks, the visible ops methodology, the ITIL, and that's how we deliver quality IT.
So you mentioned change management, other types of management. Can you rank order those?
Hey, what?
Rank all those management things you're talking about?
I sure can. So the ranking, one of the things that was foundational, we found early on in the mid-2000s, we were looking at studies. We did some roundtables with people to kind of understand what their challenges were. And one of the, actually 3 studies we found, it was the Yankee group back then, it was GRC, the early Gartner group, and so they had all done various levels of research. And what they found was, this is very interesting, is they found that 70 to 80% of all IT failure, lack of downtime, lack of availability, was correlated to some unapproved, unauthorized, untested change. So okay, the working thesis here is we need to do a really good job with change management. And if we do a good job, we're going to knock a home run of availability. And what's also really interesting, and I'll slide this in now, is that no security breach ever happens without a change or a need for a change. So either I brute force, hack something, or whatever, insert some code somewhere, hijack something, or I convince you, social engineer you, to make change for me or do something that doesn't, allow me to do nefarious activity. So interesting enough, change management is like this really core foundational thing that really drives IT performance, IT behavior, cybersecurity. It drives all of those things. So what do we mean change? So we look a little deeper at change, and I will speak, and I'll go on and on about this, but you really have to have the visible ops, but really focuses that you really have to know your configuration is solid. It's well configured, properly configured, it's securely configured. So we do that, and in the visible ops, we type electrifying the fence. So we electrify the fence, we say, nobody can make a change now unless we follow proper change management. And you can't, and that's configuration management. And in configuration management, you have things like CIs, configuration items, and CMD, the configuration management database, where everything, you have basically a database that has everything in it. You patch something, if you release a new code on it or whatever, you're actually tracking it. But then in change management, we're classifying change. Is it a pre-approved regular change that should happen, or is it the kind of change that we should actually say this is a significant change? So we need to have stakeholders involved. We need to have a change advisory board, a CAB, they call it ITIL, and we need to think it through, plan a maintenance window, forward schedule, change those things. But we also can't do really good change management if we don't, in fact, have really good release practices. So when we release things or build software, or even just in a production environment where we put a new update to the operating system on a Cisco firewall, are we thinking through in the release practices? Are we testing that without a live production system? So if we take something, there's a lot of release things and practices that ITIL gets into. Those three, I just gave everybody the Visual Ops Handbook one first version. Those three things are all connected. They're closed loop, if you will. So you work from a good configuration state, you open it up, make the change, do all the good change practices, you make sure the release is in place, and then you re-update the configuration because it's secure and well working. You lock it down and you move on to the next change. A lot of change. DevOps, before DevOps was cool. High rates are really a change at success rates.
So Scott, you started this around 19, right?
I was 19 when I started in software store, actually, software retail.
So what at the age of 19 made you tell yourself, this is my life work? Like what happened at age? Okay, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to.
Yeah, it's interesting. The story is kind of, I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial itch. I grew up with a Raspberry Patch that I did very well with in high school, hired pickers and sold them to restaurants and all that. So I always had the itch, wanted to be in business. Was really into sports, so I was kind of a closet geek in high school. Back in those days, you kind of had your group, you had your heads and your, whatever, and your jocks. And so I didn't really talk a lot about it, but I love computers and played around quite a bit with them and different technologies early on. And that really led me into being interested in it. And surprisingly enough, I had an experience at a restaurant where I was kind of helping them try to do an inventory on a good old Commodore 64 way back in the day. And we couldn't figure out how to make it work. We ordered a piece of software way back then, like $300 was, super calc. And interestingly enough, it wouldn't do what we wanted to do. And that really got me intrigued. There's got to be better ways to do this and different ways to try software and make it work. And so I had a lot of kind of interest, if you will, in that area. And so I had a partner at the time. We went and started a software retail store and grew a couple of stores and did some different things with them. And over time, we started to sell PCs. And of course, the onset of the internet was just coming on. This is 1989. So myself here, but interesting stuff, going on at that time, the proliferation of the internet stuff. So we kind of grew on that rank, and a lot of PC setting up and supporting networks. There are a fair amount of kind of consulting companies out there, integration companies doing stuff. So we started with this old product called like Lantel and Novell and some of these old networks, today that are non-existent, that was really my the whole thing. And then at some point we decided, because the software business was kind of changing, evolving, and we were more interested in, doing software development. So we did a little bit of that on the side. And I bought into a franchise called Microage. It was a Fortune 500 based out of Tempe, Arizona. And they had these Microage computer centers that did training and a lot of network integration type services. And bought a handful of those locations, if you will, and had several people around the region standing up network and that kind of thing. And it was in that process when we were building out some pretty interesting networks and even working in some e-business infrastructure early on in some big data centers like AT&T data center in Whittier, California. Interesting data center, by the way, built during the Cold War to withstand a ground zero nuclear blast. I mean, this thing was solid, concrete everywhere. But in doing that, we had some customers that, hey, would you manage this? You guys built it and rolled it out for us. Would you take on some proactive management? And I'm like, wow. So we were ongoing, charge you every month on a contract and provide X amount of services for that and define what those are. I thought, this is a great business model. So that's where we basically cherry-picked my top 5 people out of my group, my Microage group, and we dubbed it the Advanced Networking Group. And that group is what really came eventually the spin out of my IP services. And we purpose-built a niche data center that we own. It's a SaaS, it's a SOC 2 Type 2 certified facility because we do house some critical data in there, banking data and that stuff. And that data center is 14,000 square foot, so it's not huge, it's pretty niche, but it's very well done. It's an N+1, so it's got a system plus system.
That's in Oregon?
Yeah, it's in Oregon. So for every system, we have backup systems, like 2 power feeds of the building, 2 UPS infrastructures, multiple internet connections. It's like typical data center. We're many of the big guys. And that's an interesting business. So that's where we housed our IP services business in that building and really spun out and started to migrate customers into managed services type relationship. I joke before managed services was cool. That's what we're doing. And now, right, it's not managed services, it's MSSP, it's managed security services. So it evolved. We've reinvented ourselves and that's the summation of the story is, right, from software. I love the idea of technology, always loved it, and was looking for ways to reinvent ourselves, stay relevant, and frankly, to be a successful, profitable business.
So from the time you started in tech in 19, what's something about tech that you're like really surprised? Like man, I can't believe tech did this, whatever that it is.
Yeah, honestly, again, digging myself, I'd have to say the internet. I mean, at that time, we thought, well, this is interesting. And there's, certainly things you can do. You can, telnet around the internet. That's the way we use the internet. Different browsers. We use way over as all the dial-up internet services. And I just didn't really know at that time that the proliferation of the internet would go so crazy. Like it would really become the network and that everything would be connected to network. So seeing where we were, literally, 30 years ago, 27, 26, 20 years to where we are today, I mean, yeah, it's unbelievable. And obviously, along the way, the internet, with all the amazing good that it brings, it certainly introduces a lot of threats and a lot of bad too. But I would have I know that's a right answer almost, but of course, you're surprised by the internet. But if you lived it, when I lived it back there, and we're selling software boxes off the shelves, kind of thing, to think that that's all going to be downloadable, SaaSified, if you will. I mean, just would have seen all that coming at that time. And so if I step back, it's like, wow, what a journey. This thing has evolved to an unbelievable level.
I've seen some people predict that whatever you think the internet did, AI is like 100,000 times like more viral ever. What's your take on that?
Here we are again. I would totally agree. I think it's back to the future. We're in a revolution. There's no doubt. And AI is changing our lives and will change our lives. And there's a lot of good and a lot of bad. I'm not an extremist, so I'm going to sit here and say it's going to take 80% of the workforce away, and that because I don't honestly believe that. But do I think it's going to completely change the way people do work? Will it have an impact on some workforces? Yes. But yeah, I think it's a crazy future that we're headed towards, and I would say the rate of escalation, from again 1989, 90 to 2000, we started to have the onset of the internet and things kind of changed, and then watching the internet from the 2000 to 2010, 2012, it increasing its speed of evolving and becoming prolific and more relevant and being able to develop things faster. But if we look back 3 years ago, COVID probably had something to do with that too, the pandemic. But, we look back just coming out of the pandemic, I mean, that for whatever reason, that was like a booster shot for the development of AI. And so it has been unbelievable to watch how fast and how quick the maturity, if you will, even the use cases of AI. So yeah, I believe we're right in the middle of watching that.
I chatted to people. I downloaded the ChatGPT the other day, and I texted friends of mine like, Skynet is here. Like, Skynet is here, Skynet is here, right? And like, it does. And so the reach, I finally downloaded Grok, and I put a picture, said, make a video. And the video, me like, I know this ain't real. I didn't do this, but damn. I'm kind of like wondering, did I really do this now, right?
Yeah.
That's how realistic it is, right?
Yeah, we're jumping right into AI. That conversation is, again, scary and yet amazing all at the same time. I think the deep fake issue and some of those, and that's really just one aspect. There are multiple things to think about when you think about the nefarious activity that can go on, in addition to just the cyber threats and all that. I mean, the things it can do, both good and bad, is very scary, very, very scary. And as a matter of fact, how real some of the deep fakes are just unbelievable. And they're only getting better, right? Again, the evolution is moving fast. So I can imagine a year or two from now, what people could do to people with deep fakes. It's very scary.
And so follow up question, what you're like about your tech stuff, like what's something that you think has been a big disappointment as far as tech is?
Yeah, I think one of the big disappointments in tech, and this is a little bit interesting what I'm about to say, I think it's a little different take, but from my perspective, is that it is, in a sense, very reliable, and yet people don't do the things they should be doing in terms of their hygiene of managing IT, and in terms of their investment in IT. There's a little bit, particularly in the SMB space, kind of set it and forget it, and it's amazing how well things do work, and so there's a false sense of availability, IT management, sense of IT security. So there's a lot of people that are living, kind of with their head in the sand, because IT, if done fairly correctly and right, or once kind of figured out, it will kind of self-stabilize. And that stabilization or delivery of IT, people get numb. They expect it to happen. In the services business, probably one of the biggest pieces that gets us into trouble is the expectation. Somebody might, with different levels of service level agreements, right? Somebody said, no, I don't need a lot of availability and uptime. I'm good. I could be down a couple hours a month. That's not a big deal. Boy, the second they're on 30 minutes in a month because something went wrong, what do you hear from them? Yeah, there is an expectation that it's 100%. So we used to joke, no matter what CISO you sell, you're really selling 100% because that expectation's there. But they don't necessarily want to invest in keeping up and the particular upgrades and invest in the management that really needs to happen, keep things highly secure. And that still is a thing that we're seeing today. So that's one of the challenges I see. A little different take on it is IT is in a way its own worst enemy, if that makes any sense.
It does. Can you talk some about the Visible Ops book series?
Sure. So I showed about the original Visible Ops book, and that was, again, wildly popular back in the
And how many books in the series right now?
So we sold about 350,000 plus.
But how many different books are in the series?
Oh, okay. So in the book, there's 5 books in the series right now. Okay. So the original Visible Ops handbook, which is kind of what I explained earlier. Then we later released a Visible Ops Security, called Cybersecurity. So security, and it was really taking a lot of what I shared and really applying that into some more modernized, and we're now into the 2010-12 frame, more modernized practices around IT security at the time. It evolved quite a bit over the 2000s. And then we released in the later 2014, 12, 14, 16 area, I think it was 15, we released the Visible Ops Private Cloud. And that was really the onset of all kinds of virtual, servers and systems coming on. And so people deploying their own clouds in their own data centers or closets. And then, of course, some of the larger providers started to come on the scene with cloud services, AWS, Azure, Microsoft, and those kinds of things. So that was the Visible Ops Cloud book. And then we sat for a while, quite frankly, as some things were changing in the industry and kind of being a student of it. And I had the idea that we really, security, as we kind of knew coming in the 2020 timeframe, security is going to be the big deal. It's going to be a lot of brewing thoughts for 2 or 3 years. And then finally, about a year ago or so, I put some of those thoughts to paper and in December released the Visible Ops Cybersecurity book. Then it's a 405-page book. It really starts out at kind of dealing with management. We talk about leadership and philosophy of management of IT and security. And then we talk a little about the efficacy of IT processes, how important those are, which is what I shared earlier. And I think kind of those foundational things, blocking and tackling, if you will, are so important to have those in place. They're ultimate backstop to not just IT uptime availability, but to your cybersecurity. So that's then I get into zero trust and a lot of different more methodology type approach to what are some of the best practices these days and processes to use in managing cybersecurity comfort. So that was the book. And because that gets fairly deep in the latter part of the book, I realized there is a lot of geek speak, and so I try to put a lot of tables in there so that people can understand the acronyms, because like a lot of industries, we are a world, everybody knows IT is a world of acronyms. It's ridiculous. I even have to go look them up every now and then, and it's pretty easy to keep up on some of this stuff because I live it, but even now, stuff pops up, it's like, what's that? So I realized that was a bit of a problem. So recently, in the last couple months, I released a book called the Companion Guide. And it's the Visible Ops Cybersecurity Companion. The idea is that we speak. The idea that it's for leaders, executives, business owners, presidents, vice presidents, those kinds of folks that don't really want to get into the nitty gritty, but they want to understand why security is so critical. They want to understand what are cost models. I actually quote a Deloitte Touche survey that talks about the spend on IT and how much of their IT spend should actually be allocated to cybersecurity. So try to be really practical with the guidance, more prescriptive for the owner, executive, president, vice president type folks.
It says for the 400,000 people that bought it, are you able to track who buys it? Is it demographics, or are you able to give that kind of information?
Nowadays, yeah. Back in the day, no. So we just went by gross numbers of how many ordered, how many we sold in total. Nowadays, we can track a little bit. Amazon doesn't allow you to track, very specific customer buying, but we have some tools that can give some indications of who's buying the book and, who's using it.
How do you use that? How do you take advantage of that for business, so to speak? Or are you able to?
Yeah, yes and no. Honestly, the biggest thing is in authoring series and the credibility, the history of the series, of Visible Ops. I mean, there's a lot of times we'll get on a call and I'll join up, and maybe it's an intro call or a sales call, and we'll talk about the book, and they'll reach back on the shelf because we've sold so many copies. They'll hold up, you mean this book? And the original handbook, and recently one just bought my book. I was like, this book, and so it's been kind of fun. So we honestly use it as a point of credibility. The idea that we really have involved in thought leadership since the mid-2000s, and that honestly the Visible Ops book has been used by hundreds and thousands of companies. Matter of fact, we even have knowledge that some huge organizations, I named them FedEx, United Airlines, a lot of they used back in the day the Visible Ops methodology. So that's still our audience. Our target is more the SMB space, if you will. We do not really chase large enterprise businesses.
You say SMB size, like 500 people below, 100 below?
Yeah, no, I would say anywhere from 100 to 200 employees up to a couple thousand employees.
And does the revenue matter at all?
It can.
Of course, that afford, obviously.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it can. But we do have some customers that are 60, 50, 60, 70. So it's, we look at that. They have to have a reason or a particular type of business they're in they really understand that they really need help, time availability, and tight cybersecurity. So those tend to be the more the fit, because it could be a smaller company, but they have enough revenue and they do enough in tech or things that they need to protect with intellectual property, whatever, that they'd be a good fit.
So if your book it's a bestseller, the question is like most question. It's like everyone says the book's a bestseller, and it sounds like everyone can have a selling book, right? So what makes you say you're a bestseller?
Yeah, so we did a big launch of the book and a big push, and of course we have some of the history of sales of the previous book, and so people that have bought. So we reached out to what marketing reach we did have, and basically did kind of a big announcement of a big push. And honestly, with that push, the way that it works, if you can select categories that people buy your book in, that you categorize it in, you sell so many hundred books in a certain period of time, you can get deemed by Amazon as a bestseller. So we sold several hundred books in a concerted period of time with a launch, and that immediately catapulted me up to being a bestseller.
Okay, so next, on your bio, somewhere bio link to some said that you're recognized as a thought leader in modern security strategies. So like, who made you a thought leader, right? You just wrote yourself, I'm a thought leader. Did some organization do that? Because a lot of people out there is like, I'm a thought leader, I'm an expert, but are you really right? How did that come about?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, good point. We can all say what we are. I mean, I'll start off to some degree. Yeah, there's a certain self-proclamation, but it's not without the credits to back it up. So not only 30 years in the industry, a veteran of the industry, and really growing up, in a space of touring, but then also the being early on, not many people would hit the bar, being involved in the IT Process Institute, where we did research, benchmarking, and prescriptive guidance. So we did a lot of research that really backed up a lot of the claims that we made about what is a best practice around visible loss methodology tied to the ITIL. Looking at things like how do you manage change and all of the various factors, collect that, a lot of data, apply regression analysis, all the things that you do in good research. We actually partner with Gartner Group on that. But so being involved from the research side is a credibility piece. And then, of course, actually applying the world, not just theory in a book, that these are good as practice. We actually use it as a real thing and for many years and seen success from it. So I think from that foundation it does. And then along that, you kind of formalize the track, right? I do have an MBA in cybersecurity. I am certified, honestly, probably more technical than I need to be, but I'm certified on multiple technical certifications, as well as some other more process, like I'm ITIL certified, and my CCISO, Chief Information Security Officer certification. These are not run-of-the-mill, pay $200, you'll get certification kind of deal. They're pretty deep dive. So I think when you add the practical hands-on experience over the 30 years, you add the involvement in the research, again, benchmarking, prescriptive guidance development, and then you have the real-world application of using those particular methodologies and applying them. I think it makes you an expert, honestly. In my book, I think that's pretty fair to say that you're a cybersecurity expert at that point.
I agree. So back to golf real fast, right? You always hear that you play golf. If you want someone's business, do golf, right? Because you can convince them to buy your stuff in 4 hours. You might want to quit your business. Have you been able to find like a lot of business playing golf?
We do a lot of regional and national customers, so it's not always real pragmatic that I can get on the golf course with somebody. I mean, I'm generally not going to jump on a plane with my clubs and go play with but there have been some times, and particularly more in our local market, where I've rubbed shoulders with some folks, and that's been able to turn into business. So certainly wouldn't be opposed if I'm at some kind of if I'm speaking at an event, which I've done quite a bit. Speaking, which is another point to kind of be an authority on it, but speaking and doing various podcasts, not that I wouldn't certainly meet with a client go golf. I'd be open to that.
I always heard this too, like with golf, you can't play golf anyone, right? Because you don't want to play golf for far with somebody you don't like, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of time. Of course, the proverbial joke is, you go out with your buddies on a Saturday, and I'm part of a club, so go out and you both golf. It's like, well, hey, how are they doing? Your wife, and she's like, I don't know. You just spent 4 hours with them.
I know, right?
How do you not know what they're thinking or how their family's doing? So we're just guys sometimes are wired that way.
Yeah. So in your years of tech, you've done a lot of keynote addresses, correct? Mm-hmm. So when you give a keynote address, like two-part question, when you give an address, what do you want to get out of it? And then what do you want to give the people, the audience?
Sure. So number one, honestly, it's a little bit of establishing yourself as a leader, to tie back to that. So it's good for the resume, if you will, for your experience. I also enjoy kind of the study part of it, of what I'm presenting, that you make it interesting, and a little bit of sense in talking to me today, that I try to put things into more pragmatic, practical business terms, but yet we can talk techie. If we want to go techie, I'm happy to go there. So that's kind of one of the things that I enjoy. But ultimately what I'm doing, I've got two goals in mind. One is altruistic. I'm trying to raise the tide that floats the boat. So they get something out of it that they can go back, apply in their businesses, talk to their IT teams about it, their cybersecurity teams. I'm looking for those kinds of things, really get them, spur them onto better improvement of the cyber, right? Make the world a more cyber safe, better place. That's very true. And that's very true in my book. Because we talk a lot about this with AI and other things coming out. I mean, security, we don't have to do with you don't have to go create fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Just read newspaper. Look at the hospitals get hacked, all the critical information that gets hacked. So that's the point. The altruism saying, hey, this is going to help you have better cybersecurity posture if you look and apply some of the methods, things I'm sharing with you in a keynote. And then the other part that is not altruistic is that I would love to make connections with people, have a conversation, introduce them to my teams, and see if there is an opportunity for us to help them.
I think when people realize, of course, what they say, people rather die than give a public speech, right? I think when people realize, even for crowd talk, everyone in that crowd can assume you know what you're talking right. Even though they don't know you from items, they're going to, okay, Scott knows how right. Of course, some of us start talking like, we don't know what we're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's an expectation that, if you're going to get up there, they wouldn't have selected you to be one of the speakers if they didn't think you knew your stuff and you didn't have the credibility to back it up. So a lot of times, these days they'll go watch or see something. Yeah. This podcast might be watched actually and say, okay, he can actually communicate about IT and cybersecurity. So
the future of cybersecurity, in the future, you think will depend on AI more or human more for cybersecurity?
Yeah, I think I know I didn't give a bad answer, but both. And the reason I say both is because there are certain things as we look at algorithmic, behaviors are happening, heuristics on a network, that it's very easy to do in the AI, be able to catch those things and basically discount or basically categorize those as false positives, as we say, alert fatigue that happens with all of the main. Story about a guy that had a pod up a server with very poorly patched, to the thing, and within 4 hours he had 2,000 hack attempts. That's how scary it is if you put the right thing unconfigured properly, not secured. So there are thousands of attacks that are happening all the time to various networks, scanners, bots, by the millions. Honestly, they're out there. So the point is that to have a human be able to look for every one of those. Sometimes we joke a little bit about kind of the lady in the red dress, if you will, that you're looking for, that thing, in the I'm thinking of the movie reference. Sorry, it slipped my mind, but Keanu Reeves. Why is that slipping my mind? Anyway, but it's interesting, movie that we watch, and I think to try to look for certain behaviors, and it's almost impossible for a human to do a good job of that. So AI applies very well in that context because it can categorize those and note them as either relevant or not relevant, and so that's where you're going to see a lot more application of AI in that kind of vein and that way of use. But once you actually have and then of course AI can automate some of the remediation. It can automate some of the things that need to happen. We talk about SOAR and IT SOC language, security operations language, where you're doing security orchestration automation. So it's kind of called SOAR. But the idea then is that you can automate certain things. But there are certain things, to my point, new behaviors, new attacks, things that are going to come on, that you're going to have a human intervention to be able to detect the AI. AI will be able to do some of its detection of AI, but I think there's going to always be an escalation point. So I think to go upstream to kind of the really, really, really smart people that are looking at the really unique new threats that are out there. How do we begin to defend against them? How do we triage them? How do we remediate them? And then, of course, that ultimately may feed into the AI again, so it becomes more automated. So I think it's a little bit, to really make it simplified, it's a little back to the antivirus day. You buy the antivirus, right, an old antivirus, and pretty soon if you're not updating it, they got new malware. They'll go buy the antivirus. You got to get your updates, and the box and they come up with new malware back, and that's the world we're in, and it's not going to change.
So is there a law, or rule, or regulation, something that says, like, if a company gets hacked, they have to publicly tell anyone? Because my fear has always been, this hack, the company plays back, blackmail, they don't tell the public, and everyone's data is out there in the web, dark web, so to speak. Yeah, so great question. You're getting a little bit into, kind of the world of complaints, and IT was maturing rapidly as it needs to catch up, in a sense, with where IT and cybersecurity is at. But in the world of compliance, there are certain industries where you are fully regulated, and you absolutely have to disclose breach. There are state laws that govern that. There are some federal laws that govern it. So there's certain complaints framework out there. But if someone doesn't do that, how are they found out? How does someone know? So the problem is, another area of scary is that you don't. Okay. If they don't tell, they can keep it secret. So it's like an honor system almost? Yeah, essentially your vision can be there. If they do get caught, though, if somebody, somebody really does decide to tell on a company or that kind of stuff, there are certain incentives that they're creating nowadays for people to be able to, give it up if they have been hacked or whatever. Some industries and companies that are private, they aren't regulated like that. So disclosure law may not apply, or sometimes a little blurry depending on exactly what was hacked or not hacked, as whether you have to do disclosure or not disclosure. But in certain industries, like we said, healthcare, finance, there's absolutely you have to disclose. Are there any industries out there that should not worry about cybersecurity? In this day and age where we talk about IoT, the Internet of Things, and everything becoming connected to the Internet, I would have to say unequivocally no. Okay. Everybody needs to think about their cybersecurity. And suppose somebody out of business today, they have a few customers, whatever the case be, they're small. They have 3 or 4 employees. When should they start either thinking about bringing on an actual cybersecurity internally or hiring someone like you?
Yeah, so if you're small and you really can't afford a full-time cybersecurity person, that's where I think you get to the provider world. Your MS, and I would look for more of an MSSP that services really smaller companies. And as you're scaling and growing, you need to keep up. So you can outgrow your MSSP. That's very possible. They may have a limited set of cyber things that they do that gives you a certain amount of protection. And for a small company, and would never bank on this, so I won't take back what I'm going to say, but there's a little bit of security by obscurity, right? You're not one of the big boys. You're not Chase Bank, so you're not going to be a big part because there's not a lot of value necessarily on the data they're going to get, depending on what industry and what you're doing, and pretending you're not regulated. If you're regulated, you're small. You need to figure those costs to really keep your cybersecurity as tight as you possibly can. So I'm not advocating bad or poor or minimalistic on your cybersecurity. I'm just saying you got to keep it realistic, because in fact, one of the conventions that I was at, conferences, we had one of the examiners from the FDIC for banking, and basically got up and said, you can't spend enough on cybersecurity. Whatever your bank budget is, you need to reorganize it, and it probably needs to be in the future your biggest budget item. That's where it's going. So that's where we're at. So for small business, I think you look for an MSSP that has some security chops that can give you a basic layer of security. And there are some very practical things you can do. MFA, multi-factor authentication. Most of us are doing that. We log our Amazon accounts or whatever. MFA is being hijacked, though. They're learning ways to get the SMS text messages. They'll first hack your email. Then after email, they'll hijack your login something. Keyboard sniffer where they see your keystrokes, and they can actually see what you're putting in. Those are all pretty easy by just clicking on a link on a website that you didn't know what it was. You thought it looked pretty innocent, and you close it down. It's possible that a keyboard sniffer got involved, and now they can look at that. They can hack your email. Then they know what your code is. So there's lots of ways MFA is actually not hitting the bar, and yet at the same time, I think the last stat I read, only about 60% of people are actively using MFA. So we got this huge gap, and then MFA becoming antiquated. So what I talk about in my book, one of the called Verified Credential Access, VCA. And what that is it's basically advanced MFA. So rather than just a code come into your SMS on your text or come into an email, we actually use an app that's on the phone. And many people are familiar with the Authenticator apps. You have them in Google, Microsoft. Most of those are what we call verified credential access. Actually, it's an encryption key. It's on your phone, and it's authenticating against a server that says you're you. That's what we call decentralized authentication. So the central part is authenticating the remote app, and it knows that you're constantly verifying. That way, you're not going to sniff an SMS, you're not going to take email back into your account. It's going to know you don't have the app. So that's the next generation, if you will, in the up and coming. And a lot of companies are rolling out what we call verified credential access.
Yeah, I think the challenge is going back to the guy who says cybersecurity is your number one spend. Founder and the salesperson, the marketing person, the hero, right? So how does a founder decide it can't be all priority, right?
Right. Yeah. I think you've got to be able to start some basic analytics. You got to make it a priority. You care. You can't just put your S. And I spoke that a little earlier. I said, IT in some ways is its own worst enemy, because a lot of people are, kind of secure by being obscure, and they're not that big until they are. And they're going after little tiny businesses. I mean, we've been pulled into some small, $1 million of revenue, $500,000 of revenue with companies, that we've given some advice to and that kind of stuff and jumped in to help. But it's really interesting. Matter of fact, just to go on this rant a little bit is, the sophistication of ransomware, particularly, but a lot of other threats and hijacks and cyber threats. They are amazing. If you're a middle school or a high school kid that just happens to be a great little techie and you love it, and you are going to be curious, we're all young and dumb at one point. So you go on the Tor, which is the dark web that we all hear about. It's called Tor browser, which you should never use. You go out on the Tor browser, you can actually sign up to a franchise ransomware. So I pay $299 or $100. I become part of their franchise. They give me a set of tools, and I go out and I sit in Starbucks and try to hack Wi-Fi with somebody's in their passwords or different things that I can do. But particularly, they tend to go after businesses you think you can. So they're scanning those bots. If they get an entrance into something and their tools won't quite do it, they can escalate their franchise partner. They'll bring in one of their advanced hackers, and together you'll go hack the business, basically encrypt all their data until they pay a certain amount. You black screen to death with a tech code that says you need to pay, 100 Bitcoin to whatever, 30 Bitcoin, right, 100,000 to million. And basically they'll come in and help you do it, and they'll split the profits with you. That's sophistication. And then when you go to pay, most of them, because most businesses don't deal crypto, they'll say, oh, you need to call our 1-800 number to call center. They'll get you taken care of. That's crazy.
Is the Tor browser illegal?
No, it's not illegal. There's a ton of illegal things when you're in the Tor. The whole level of the internet. A lot of people don't understand that we're really dealing about 20-25%, the typical average user of the internet, our typical browsers that we use. But with Tor, there's a whole dark world out there.
Yeah, I've heard all that crazy going on there.
Crazy stuff.
So what's your recommendation for someone who wants to find their first service provider? What should they look for?
Yeah, a few basic things. You want to obviously make sure that they have been around a while, so know what they're doing. It's always good to talk to a customer too. That's a good thing. But I think you're looking for somebody that is a good fit in terms of what they can offer, and do they really have the expertise? Not only doing it for a while, but delivering the service, talking to the customers, but do they really have the keeping up on the latest technology? There's a lot of MSPs that are out there that are trying to do the MSSP thing, but basically just kind of turned on a tool. Matter of fact, a lot of your big shops, the 3-4 guys are doing fixing a network on a computer and doing different things like that. Then they turn on a monitoring tool for $5 a month, and then they call themselves an MSP, but they're not necessarily doing all of the robust things that you should rely on that an MSP would do. And so that sometimes is a bit of a stretch. But then from MSP to become an MSSP, that's another stretch, because it's not just turning on one tool. Like we do EDR, endpoint detection response. EDR is like it's the new antivirus, if you will. Everybody should be using some form of EDR, because it's listening to basically a signal engine. The EDR platforms are out there, and they know the latest threats that are coming in, the malwares and the ransomwares. If it basically clicks on the wrong thing, wrong link in an email or a browser, it will arrest at that place. It'll arrest the attack.
So people in your career field have all these certifications, right? Is this really a point of these certifications? Is it just like an ego boost, or is it actually proving something?
To be certified, I think it's twofold. We all know that we talk a little bit about in our hiring processes. There's this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger stuff? People think they're a little bit more able than they actually are, but the Dunning-Kruger proves, and we're a little smarter than we are. So what we've learned is that there's kind of crystallized knowledge that people get, and we all know folks that can go out and study up and pass a test and are really good at crystallized knowledge. But when it comes to the fluid intelligence, how do I apply that knowledge that I've gained in real world experience? It's, kind of real world can't replace that, right? You got to have the real world experience to marry with crystallized knowledge. So we're looking for people to have a balance. And quite frankly, if I have to choose, I'm probably going to go with a more fluid intelligent person than I am the crystallized knowledge. But when you bring both together, and it's, you've got the technical chops and the academic chops to understand concepts, things, technical, drill down, if you will, then you marry that to experience. That's when you get the person that is really becomes, really proficient and more of an expert in their field.
Can you talk about something called shiny hunters and scatter spiders, how they're joining forces?
Yeah, I think I don't explain that a bit more. I'm not sure.
I saw it from your LinkedIn. Yeah. You did a post that said 2 of the most dangerous hacker groups, shiny hunters and scatter spider, joining forces.
Right. Okay. So a little bit back to the deep, think on ransomware and this idea that you can go on the dark web. There are a bunch of groups that work together, and they're not franchises for your high school or middle school. These are formalized. I mean, I've seen certain articles and sightings of things that literally people, kind of putting on their workloads, saying goodbye to the family and going to the office. And these are little hacker centrals. They're working for a corporation in the business of hacking. They're literally, even though they're virtual and they exist all over the world, they come together with kind of a shared purpose. And there tends to be different types, kind of 3 archetypes of, threat actors out there. Some are for profit. Some are for a cause, right? It's some kind of a cultural cause or the make a statement. And then some are both, just opportunist. So kind of those 3 archetypes. These particular 2 groups that I referred to, they share the profit side of things, and that's what they're after. And they learn that come together with all their expertise and their different camps, their different methods of hacking. And there are a lot of methods of how to hack. They're learning to work together, so they're teaming up. It's kind of back to that a bigger version of the smaller franchise thing I was sharing.
So fair depends the hack done, but what kind of penalties for a hacker if get caught? So because they can become a felony, lifetime jail,
absolutely.
Or is it a bullshit?
No, it's absolutely. In matter of fact, they're cranking down. The problem is there's so much activity that the FBI, and this is what they know, they really, I think the rest they're only able to investigate about 2 out of 10 cases. And it has to meet the bar. So you get, a little business and they kind of, ransomware you up and they crypto your stuff and they tell you that they want you to pay $200,000 and you get down, you pay them $50,000 to get your stuff back. The FBI doesn't really care. They'll note it, they'll put it in their thing, they'll watch it and see if they behave, that they can report them, but they can't. So it is a problem in terms of, getting trouble. That they aren't really chasing them because they don't have the bandwidth and the capability. They're just looking for the big offenders. And so there really isn't, that's a scary part, right? They're able to crack down on it more. We'd probably be able to squelch a lot of the threats as they know there's big damage. However, at the same time, read stories about a high schooler that broke into a business or back into a high school to change his grades or whatever. I've heard you see some of those stories out there. They get in trouble. So you never know. But right now, I think that the way that the landscape is, the threat landscape is so, vast and so common that you can't really track down. If you do in fact get caught, you're breaking all kinds. You're breaking federal laws. You're breaking state laws. certain level raise the level of crime depending on how much money you've ransomware or data you've stolen or whatever. Of course, if it's more of a regulated environment and they're breaking all kinds of regulatory laws, so there's a big trouble. People are in jail for years and years for hacking.
What if someone from a foreign country has it? I mean, do we have any jurisdictions like some Thailand, Ukraine, Russia, Poland, Vietnam? Like, does the FBI really do anything then?
Yeah, so they were there poll. They have divisions on that. I'm not really an expert in this field. I have studied kind of geopolitical implications, if you will, of cyber threats because they're relevant to the stuff that we do. But while we don't do a lot of national type stuff, yes, they do. There are agencies and divisions that most countries have set up that will work collaboratively with the FBI, and they will help try to nail down where the hacker can the IP addresses ultimately they're trying to get, or some kind of a latent piece of data that they left somewhere that they can trace and track to try to nail the threat actor. For
lack of a better term, is a country out there that's known as the hacker mecca, where like we all top hackers are in this one location?
So honestly, be a little careful, but I think Russia, Ukraine, and China are the big offenders. There are some other countries that play into that as well, but that's generally your biggest, because they don't really police it within the country at the level that they should.
Okay, it's kind of like a three-part question. So like, who's like your customer? How you market to them, and then why should they choose you?
Yeah, great. I can train a sales pitch. I think a lot of what we talked about today, I think our history of thought leadership and best practices are really relevant. We're following some of the tip of the spear solutions that we're delivering that you can't just find a lot of MSP companies. And a lot of that comes back to following really lead with what we call a zero trust methodology. Zero trust has been around for a long time. But what it really is, it's layers. You're approaching all of your cybersecurity methods and ability to defend the bad actors in layers. So we look at every particular element of the network. And zero trust, there are actually 7 pillars of the layers of the network. It's not really the OSI model per se, but they're looking at layers in the network, like identity and access management is a layer. How are people authenticating? We're talking about with MFA and making sure that you've got role-based access, ROC, and all those things. But then down in the deeper part of the layers that get a little complicated is microsegmentation. Actually, before I talk about microsegmentation, one of the principles prerequisites or assumed elements of zero trust is assumed breach. And we see that because the big companies like the casinos and different things we see, some of these that are out there, they have like the latest and greatest tools. They have the best. They've hired the $500,000 smartest guys, and yet we still see them getting hacked. So assuming breach is a pretty safe thing, right? It's like, wow, all that and all the tools, and they still somehow got hacked. And then you see it, you read about it, commonly. It's a common thing. So the point is that we have to assume breach. And for, a lot of the medium-sized enterprise that we work with, we need to make sure that you got backups, Bob and IT, Aaron and IT, so we have backups. But do you really have backups? And we care less about backup, more about restoration. That's not even good enough. Backing up in the ability to restore, yay, we're streaming it to a cloud. We're good. It's off-site. Not good enough. We have to go much deeper, and we start with that. Number one, the backups need to be immutable, meaning that they cannot be traced or touched from your network. They have to have a completely separate access point to get to the backups. Some people call that air-gapped, complete air-gap from your network. The reason is that in most ransomware cases, they will breach their patient. They'll wait months, 3 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then they'll watch during that time, and they'll see that you're streaming them to a cloud, but they're not maybe encrypted. And so they'll go to the encryption point, wherever it is, the data point they're streaming to. We can have access to your network because they've already breached it, and they'll encrypt them there. So a lot of the cases, there are people with ransomware, like they're thinking, no, not a big deal. We got those backups, right, Bob? And Bob's like, yeah, we got the backups. So they go to the backups, and they got the same message there. They're encrypted as well. They're nothing they can do. So they're compromised completely, and they have to then negotiate with the threat actors. And so that's a big deal. Another side note, by the way, not to get on a tangent, but one of the big things out there to get into PQC, which is post-quantum computing, one of the big deals with that is that as that becomes available, the quantum computing to the threat actors, their ability to hack what we would call our standard, run-of-the-mill, business grade, whatever you want to call it, cryptography, which is called 512 or 256-bit decryption. They can hack that in a matter of days with quantum computers. So data harvesting is really popular. So even when they get to the encrypted backups, not to scare people, but they get there, it's like, we're doing all good stuff, encrypted backups, but then they can harvest that, and they're going to sit on it for a while. Because there'll still be data that's sitting in those encrypted backups. And when these quantum computers become available, because they're smart, they're in advance, they've got a business plan, they'll be able to go back through all that data and de-encrypt it. And whatever might be living there, if you don't have basically post-quantum cryptography, which will defend against those things, you're in trouble. And we're going to see, as we talk about in this session, the escalation of technology, how fast things evolve. We told you that's 10 years away. I'd have probably said that 4 years ago. Now I say, people say, that's still for 5 years away. I don't know. I think there's an initiative out there by like NIST, the National Institute of Standards, security standards saying that by 2030, all the financial services and the government agencies need to have post-quantum cryptography in place. So it's coming, and it's coming faster than people think. Back to zero trust, back to immutable backups. The next piece is beyond that in this assumed breach is that we then have to know what we call RPO and RTO, more acronyms in the world. What is the point in time we want to recover to? In other words, when did we last snapshot or back that up? 4 hours? 8 hours? Every day? Once a week? We want to know what that is. What can our business live with? Then we need to think about the RTO, which is the recovery time objective. So we're going, how long is it going to take me to get back to that point where we took last backup? So we need to think that through, and where's that going to be stood up if your systems are hacked? We're still, one of the things that's really important if you do get hacked, and this is kind of an alert for everybody, a lot of people are quick IT people start throwing and erasing stuff and redoing stuff and formatting stuff. You really want to collect that evidence. That's really important. You don't want to, forensics there, so you don't want to be too quick. You want to capture it in the state that it's in the hack state, because that really helps provide data to prevent future failures or future hacks. It also helps altruistically of people that may be hacked by that group or the method. Anyway, without getting too, I'm getting in pretty deep here, but back to zero trust and leave those layers. And so the assumed breach is really important. And that's a big head up to your listenership. If you're out there and you really think you've been told your backup are good, I challenge you. The other thing that people think about, business owners, a little bit is like, hey, we're paying quite a bit for cyber insurance these days. We're good and think, well, at least I got insurance. Well, guess what? 44% of all cybersecurity claims in 2024 denied. They're getting smart. Their fine print, as insurance companies do. If you're not doing managed detection response, doing active detection and active, cybersecurity methods on your network, they will pay. And so they're learning, the fine print really matters. And I think a lot of businesses are none of that. So reviewing your cybersecurity insurance and knowing what it says you need to have in place, that's a really important piece too. But to get back now, kind of backtracking to microsegmentation is part of your trust, the methodology that we start with companies, help them. We look at it through that lens, and we really look at it pragmatically, kind of layer by layer. You can't eat an elephant. You have to do one bite at a time. So we look at the common, practical, most defensible things we can put in place right away. So again, good backups, and then we go to good identity and access management. So we know that you've got good authentication, because email is our biggest threat. We know that 75 to 80% of all breaches start through a user. They are the new endpoint. They are the weakness. They're socially engineered. They click on something in their email. So we look at all those practices. But as we start to tour, we want to go deep into the layers. We get into things like microsegmentation. And this is back to some of the services we provide, like really good stuff around microsegmentation. We have a couple of partnerships that are very interesting. One is with a company called Zentera. And we deliver their service. It's the orchestration policy based. And it really is beyond what we call network segmentation, where you're kind of segmenting all the network, and the manufacturer might be accessing this part of the network, so they're pretty isolated, but all accounting is in this part and management in this part. You can segment using your hardware approach to that. But the new element of better security practice is a microsegment. So if, Sharon from accounting needs to get accounting and Mike from accounting needs to get accounting, but they don't need to be in the operations software, it will actually microsegment their behavior and say you can only access those things least privileged. And that's really what zero trust is. We're zero trusting, trust but verify everything. Kind of the least privilege of old when you're seeing a piece of software, and even I keep using the accounting example. Somebody needs to have access to the AP module, but they don't need to get in the GL. So we leave them limited to, they may be reporting, so we're going to limit their access. And that really what zero trust is when you get right down to it. It's least privilege all the way out to the end user in all of your IT systems.
Well, Scott, I'm going to let's suppose 10,000 companies got blackmail, so to speak. There's something out there showing that of these 10,000, a certain number actually paid the blackmail, a certain number didn't. Is anything like that out there? So
the federal FBI crime, and there's a couple of different divisions out there that do keep certain statistics of stuff, but it's not really readily available. It's in some of the reports, and there are 4 kind of big companies that put out Verizon does a really big security report, really valuable. Gartner puts out one. So you can kind of get some of those stats out there from there. But again, as we keep saying here, is that nobody's safe, no business is too small, and it is prolific. It's happening more and more and more all the time. It's only getting worse, not better.
I wonder if that happened, right? Like, suppose they hack a business and the owner, what? I'm going to go back, close my business, and I'm struggling. Thank you for being the founder in the coffin. Thank you so much. I'm not paying you to sit down.
Yeah, that's really funny. Unfortunately, not funny, but it is something that people have to invest in. There's really no choice, and at least you've got to employ some basic defenses beyond just the fact that people have passwords, and passwords alone, that's another thing, right? Again, it's kind of back to identity and access management, using strong passwords and not leaving them on stick notes and all those things, right? Those are important, but it's gone so far beyond that. It's getting more affordable, honestly. For not a ton of money, and in my executive handbook, I kind of give some examples, a little bit of what the costs are to deploy some of the good cyber stuff. So that is a good news in that sense, but it is an investment, and it's not cheap either. So I don't want to mislead, but it's really important. I mean, what's it worth to protect your business? 40% of businesses get a serious cyber hack with a business within a year.
So let's talk about the actual cybersecurity field, right? I'm opening this, right? Can you talk about like any advice for anyone in the field, like the future cybersecurity, whole take on all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. If you're, saying one of the things you really have to understand, if you're going to understand really good cybersecurity, is you really got to understand networks and systems. Because if you don't understand them, after one of my recent blogs on LinkedIn, I was going techie and getting down to that. If you don't really understand how to parse IP packets, and really understand what we call 7 layers of the OSI model, if you don't understand at that level, you're going to be misled with certain things. You're not going to understand how certain breaches and things happen and to be able to really defend against it yourself. The other thing for development, just understanding that, starting with a good, technology training and certification to get your hands-on experience. Hopefully you can do both, right? You need to go on the dual track. Where do I get hands-on experience? Whether that's a home lab or it's a lab at your college or your school, or whether that is working somewhere part-time or even doing internship. Really got to get your hands on stuff. And then you need to be doing the crystallized stuff because you're going to need both the knowledge pieces. And you need to really understand IT before you just go chasing cybersecurity. And that's one of the fallacies I see out there a little bit with the people that are interested in cyber. I want to go catch the bad guys in cyber. It's the cool thing. But they really don't understand the foundational elements around operating systems and how they work, and how networking works, and some of those other elements of the network. So you really do need to be a student of systems and network in general, IT in general. Then you can start on your craft on the cyber elements.
So from your experience, how long does it take for someone to be like, middle of the road, good cybersecurity?
I think it's 5 years.
5 years,
Yeah,
okay.
I think it's 5 years. I see 3. It's somebody really sharp and quit study and they're really sharp. I mean, that would maybe 3, but typically it's a 5-year experience to really start to get it.
And with AI, like people grad college now, I know like we talk about if you're a software developer now, you're kind of fucked, right? Mm-hmm. Is cybersecurity, 3 people kind of the same way, or they're in a better place than software developers?
No, they're in a better place, I think, than software development because, only your more senior developer are going to have AI is knock out all the simple stuff. There's a lot of issues with AI development, though. That's, again, like kind of back to being a pragmatist about AI. Yes, it is the future. It's here. It's going to change things. But even the stuff that people are bragging about isn't necessarily what you're being told is what it's actually doing. There's a lot of hallucination that is still happening in AI and development and coding, go create stuff. And some of my teams have pointed out some of the stuff where it actually is almost more work to go back and correct the AI than to actually. So there's still some big gaps out there. And so if you're going to go development, I think it's a long road. I think there's still going to be a demand and a need, but you're going to elevate your game because a lot of basic level stuff in the next 3, 4, 5 years are going to be more automated with AI. You're going to figure that out pretty quick. But I think that's one of the important pieces.
So this is like a someone getting right. So right now, it's like AI doing the software engineer developer jobs. In the mid are still doing this stuff. But in the mid and senior people like retire, go away, the people who train on stuff now have training. So who's going to take mid-level and senior people? Is it going to be good to upgrade AI because the people can't do it? They haven't learned the craft, right?
Yeah, I think you're addressing one of the potential gaps, right? I mean, I think part of the pivot of being a developer is actually understanding AI and how to use AI, looking at the large language models and also some of the more niche models where you're looking at the more limited models and how do we apply that for a particular type of AI. It's very specific. It's closed. It's not an open AI that's going out and looking for thousands. The other thing is that, the computing power is a real problem, right? The GPU crisis that NVIDIA is so crazy, that's a real thing. Those companies that have, that kind of processing power, that is the future. Google, Microsoft, IBM, they all have great initiatives around quantum computing, but they're only allowing right now, I think, up to 10% of most of their networks to be used because there's such a demand. They're still figuring things out in terms of scalability and all of that. I got a little bit off the tangent there, but the point being is that, maybe shifting from being a developer in more the traditional sense, but more being an AI expert. Mm-hmm. That might be your pivot. I'm young and don't have a ton of experience in development, but I understand AI modules, how to employ them, how to apply them, how to make them plug-in software to make it more effective and more automated and easier to use. That might be a pivot for somebody that's wanting to go into software development. But I do think there's a gap. I think we are going to displace, like certain factory workers with robotics and AI automation is going to get replaced for sure. I think some of the development pieces, I think it's going to, and there is a gap. How do I become an expert when I didn't really get the chance to develop my chops on development? So that is a problem. You have to be a student of it, and I think just be smart. Yeah.
So do industries need different cybersecurity solutions?
Yeah, that's true to a point. There are different emphasis and different threat elements, if you will. There are certain vulnerabilities are higher in certain particular sectors and industries. Medical as compared to manufacturing. Like in manufacturing, one of their big threats is what we call the Internet of Things, but the IoT, which is operational. information technology. So these are machines, which are medical sometimes too, but manufacturing CNC machines or this kind of things. These things are typically very customized to do very specific manufacturing things, and so they are supported and upgraded by third parties. So you're constantly letting some kind of a reseller or a manufacturer into your network to do things. And this gets to be problematic. This is actually where microsegmentation comes in, because you can super isolate, totally control their access to the network in those machines. But that's a threat, and that operational technology is an issue. Just like in a hospital room, there's machines plugged in all over to the network, right? All the ICU machines and the heart machine, all that stuff that they use. I could name all of them, but there's just a ton. As you look in a hospital room, that's all connected. It's the Internet of Things. So they're going to have different vulnerabilities and threats, maybe differently than other type of sectors than maybe a software company. But that being said, at the end of the day, kind of blocking and tackling one IT processes still matter, and that's really important. Come back to that, and that's a foundational element of building really solid cybersecurity program and good IT availability management. The other thing is that they're not that dissimilar. Certain things you're going to deploy in the security stack defend against certain things like MDR, which is managed attack response. You're monitoring the network for nefarious behavior. You're going to need that in all those. So a lot of it kind of maps back to the same foundational set of security solutions and controls. So a big piece, maybe like a 75-20. 75, you need the full stack. You need all those good blocking. The 25% nuance. You're manufacturing. You need to really think about these particular vulnerabilities and threats because they're more germane to manufacturing. Your medical, you think more about the EPII, right? They really want the medical record. Those are really valuable black market. So they're trying to protect your records and your data, really watching your data close. So these are the kinds of nuances.
Is it like one international standard everyone follows, or each country kind of does their own thing?
Yeah. So the short answer is each country kind of does its own thing, but there are frameworks out there. The U.S. is a leader in the framework. So certainly I'm a big fan of CISSP, which is the Center for Internet Security. Matter of fact, one of the chief evangelists for them is one of the people that wrote one of the reviews on my book, Tony Sagar. Great people over there. But the other thing is the National Institute of Standards is making really big grants. They have a lot of standards, control frameworks that you have to follow. And that's usually when you get into compliance. So if you're medical, you have to follow a certain NIST standard. If you're a manufacturing company, it's NIST 800-171. You need to follow that. And then they have things like CMMC, which is Cybersecurity Maturity Capability Model. And it's kind of complicated, but you have to have certain compliance and test through audit and stuff that you actually have those controls. In some places, they not actively monitor you or audit you, but you have to say you meet the standards in order to do business with government or with the state or the feds or the military. And they will, from time to time, randomly pull audits. And if you don't hit the bar, you can get in big trouble with fines.
So how do you personally leadership and tech together?
Well, I think in the first part of my book, the chapter is really, it's leadership first. So it's this idea of really a security first mindset. For so long in IT, growing up in IT and evolving in IT, security used to really be an afterthought. Matter of fact, when we put the Visible Ops Security original version, that was really the context it was written in. It was a lot of like, you need to kind of go back and tack on security to your software. You need to kind of think about, writing a new module and capability, and you need to add these and add this. It's all this afterthought. That really is bad security. Because in this dispensation of technology and cyber threats, you really need to have a security first mindset. So one of the first things at the table you're thinking about right from the beginning, whether you're developing software or rolling out a network or building an e-business platform or cloud, going cloud and everything, you need to make sure that your security first is thought about. How is this going to impact? And one of the challenges we have, one of my 4 articles I wrote, one of the challenges we have a little bit is this idea of making, being user aware. Because the other thing is we kind of get in a vacuum. So leadership gets convinced that, we need to really tighten this down with security, and there's a knee-jerk reaction. And we make so tight and so hard that our user experience, they're all rolling their eyes. Like, this is crazy. They've added, an hour of my day and I can't get stuff done because I got to log in. I got to have a different crazy strong password. And there are solutions for those things out there, like password management solutions that will actually kind of automate. You want to log in, you can actually have it on your browser. It's still using strong passwords, very protected. It will autofill in those strong, crazy, passwords that we see. So there are things there. So the idea of leadership is that you really model it by following and believing in it, which means you're talking about it in your boardroom. I do board advisory and sit on some boards. And the idea is that, really need to get cybersecurity up into the boardroom because we need to budget for it. We need to think about it in advance. And leadership needs to make sure that people are being briefed. So you're aware. You don't want to be the next news article, and you don't want to have that breach and run your business, the risk of going out of business or crazy data and having to disclose that, a bunch of critical credit card or personal information got released. That's a big deal. It's a below reputation. There's a lot of fallout from that can happen. So leadership first, security first mindset, make it important, model it, take it up to the boardroom, and then support your IT teams. You do that through modeling it and providing budget.
So talk through this. Like, how many signs up with you? Talk through the process method, how you start with them from day one to set everything up.
Yeah, so we usually start out with some kind of, and I say this a little bit tongue in cheek because it seems like a lot of the cybersecurity companies out there, MSPs, all have assessment of some sorts. We go a little deeper. We actually use a penetration test. And so typically there's a pretty expensive to deliver, and there are different levels and types of penetration tests, but we kind of a broad one that touches most all the critical elements of the network, but we're sampling just a few machines. We actually can do it where it runs kind of incognito. It doesn't, affect the network or anything. And it's going out there and it's testing things like, can I get a packet, process a payload, a packet with data through the firewall from the outside. It does very basic tests like that, and then gives a summary report. And that gives us a great insight as to where the vulnerabilities are in the network. It creates quite a cool thing. We call it a pen level 1 test. And again, pen tests are kind of expensive to do, but we start there no matter what. We take a look at that. And that can help us start to build a roadmap. As we see, we got a lot of passwords and we manage. We know that identity and access management might be issues. We need to make sure we got a solution in there. We start to then apply the layers from what we learned from the pen test. We also do some assessment. We'll talk about certain things you may have in place, and we may look at your insurance policy because a lot of times we'll start there. Like, you've got insurance. Do you know that it'll pay? And so let's talk about that. What do you do? It's we'll do assessment, gives a nice little report, and then we'll look at their policy for them and say, yeah, here's your gap report. You've got 7 things you're not doing, and your insurance company likely won't pay. So between those 2 things, that's where we go. And then from there, we build a plan, basically. And we, again, we have to be, respectful of people's the time and budget to be able to do those things. What does it cost to implement? How quickly can we get some of those things implemented? How big are the gaps? If we've got really, really exposed, exposures that are wide open vulnerabilities that anybody could just drive a truck through metaphorically, to hack your network, we're going to respond pretty quick to that. And we're going to have a very specific solution for that. So that's how we kind of do it. Contracts are usually a month over. They're not, one time. We do an ongoing service contracts with people, and we usually, build maturity over time. And then one of the things in my book we talk about is continual penetration testing. It used to be like vulnerability where they scan networks, and a lot of people have a Nest scanner set up, or they'll do things themselves. That used to be like once a year. Then they said twice a year for vulnerability scanning. Then they said, well, really once a quarter. Now they're saying monthly. And the other thing now is to come up there saying, well, 1 pen test a year, 1 good penetration test to try to break in or brute force your network from all the different various elements, both inside and outside. They used to say, do those 1 year, and then twice a year, then once a quarter. And now, just now, over the last 6 months, really the best practice that's being recommended by a lot of the frameworks out there is that you should be doing continual penetration testing. Some of the new HIPAA requirements for medical healthcare saying regular penetration testing. Regular penetration testing is a recommended solution. So one of the services we deliver is we use a third party because we can't be the guys who are managing your cybersecurity and then say, oh, we do a really good job. You're super secure. So we use a partner and we pay for that service, but then we provide ongoing continual penetration testing at different levels for our customers as part of service to make sure we're doing everything we say we do to make sure you really are secure and tight and able to resist the threats.
So this is one of my pet peeves, right? You ask someone to look at stuff, right? We marketing yourself with they're coming like, it's almost like they talk to you like a child, right? You're not doing this, not doing that, blah, blah. You like to yourself, like, MF, like, I know what I'm doing wrong, but give me a solution, right? Like, unless you tell me I'm clone myself, like, all these people come and like tell you what you're not doing wrong or you're not doing right. Like, I kind of know that already, right? Like, provide a solution. And like you said, like, what value add is it? Doesn't no value just say, bah, bah, bah,
Yeah. I think, again, we, most organizations we engage with, they realize that they have gaps and they wouldn't be talking to us if they didn't. We actually, don't typically get pulled in after somebody's had, there's very few where we're getting pulled in after. And it's funny how once people have had a breach, they're so quick to now all of a sudden it's security first, we got the budget, and it will cost them 4, 5, 8 times. Studies will show 7, 8 times the money retroactively, then put the security in place if you'd have done it proactively on a plan from the
What's
beginning.
What's that saying? That answer prevention is worth the cure or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, whatever. Yes, there's an idiom there. Yeah. And exactly. The prevention is so important. It's not unlike health, for an individual. Preventative things, and people are shocked when they don't take care of themselves, when medical incidents happen. Very similar, great analogy. So I think that, putting together a plan, because you can't, now, cybersecurity is kind of like swallowing it. Even if you're a small to medium business, it's a little bit like eating an elephant. You got to take one bite at a time. We got to look at the layers. What are the biggest threats? And then we apply those layers to the threats, and we make the application. We bring solutions to those. We have a full stack, and as I shared earlier, we're even doing. We think a differentiation is not only about leadership and history in the space, but we think really one of our biggest differentiations is that we are providing solutions that are really I keep using tip of spear. In other words, things that are super effective and super modernized and super right now today. Not just AI tools that we use, but really this like micro-segmentation tools and some of the things we're doing that are really putting your best posture, your best defense. Keep in mind, there's no guarantee. And just like we see the big boys, still getting hacked with all the resources they throw and stuff, you possibly could be hacked. So we want to start with that breach. That's where we start with everybody. So that's often not that expensive to do, quite frankly, to either make improvements in your backup restoration or RTO, or if it's something that we can easily just deliver as a managed service, which in most cases, a lot of cases, we do just take over and start delivering it as a service.
So like Microsoft for sure, Rack, Space, Oracle, AWS, all these cloud services, are any of them like not being better cybersecurity, or are they pretty much the same?
Generally the same. That's one of the fallacies a little bit of some of the big data centers or the big cloud providers, that people have a little bit of an assumption, in the cloud, therefore it's managed, therefore it's secure, therefore that's not true. The devil is in the details on those, cloud providers, because if you want to have certain types of guarantee controls or cyber practices in place, you have to basically add those as options to your cloud instances. And so it gets fairly sophisticated, gets complicated, and quite frankly, it does get expensive. So there's been a little bit lately of people looking at the bigger providers and maybe looking for more niche providers in the cloud data center space. And that's interesting. But if you are willing to pay and you do your research, you get the right, set and configure your cloud, you can get into some very highly secure elements in the cloud with some of those big providers. They all have different levels and layers that they can open you up to. But we do read about, they're also big targets, right? So, people love to hack Microsoft.
And what a way to make as a team hacker, right?
Yeah, exactly. Huge target on your, on your back or chest if you're a Microsoft or AWS or whatever.
So what's, in your opinion, what's overhyped in cybersecurity right now?
I think what might be overhyped is that people are kind of thinking that as long as they have some kind of a managed detection or response system, EDR and MDR, it's one of those two things. There's more to that and to be watched and actively monitored. But they're kind of thinking they have at least that in place and have some good email security in place, because it's where a lot of the hacks people, they're tending to think that they're being kind of shrewd and cunning almost, like, we really spend a lot of time and energy on these two things. And then they're kind of blaming the other stuff or not making a priority of it. And the bad guys find a way in. They don't just come in one direction, one way. Admittedly, there's some common sense that if the end user is the biggest, hack entry point, then of course we want to make sure we've got all those, kind of use cases about how they could be socially engineered. So you really should be doing security awareness training. And a lot of companies are and think, we've got good email security, we're doing a lot of security awareness training, because that's where most of the threats come from. So kind of because the business probably is prioritizing it, and maybe they're not really ready to go make the fight to the business that we need to really improve our cybersecurity. They're kind of saying it's just good enough. So there's a little bit of that just good enough mentality, and I think that's a real problem.
So what's some kind of like elementary cybersecurity, basic level cybersecurity that people will often forget is actually very useful?
Yeah, I just alluded to it earlier. I'd probably say two things. Main thing is the EDR, which is endpoint detection response. Everybody, in a sense, small business or not, medium, large enterprise, you've got to have an endpoint detection response that's out there. There's different ones out there, lots of really good ones. SentinelOne is one's popular we use. There are a lot of different ones. But that's that endpoint detection response, again, that is like the newest antivirus malware that we used to plug into all computers. It's now listening to the latest threat malware, and it will shut down and arrest an attack right at that endpoint at your computer before it infects the rest of it or the network or other systems on the network. That's a really big basic 101. You got to have an EDR. Number two, you really do need to have, I just said it, email security, because so many threats, you need to be able to block spam, threat, and those kind of things. And along with that is security awareness training. We call it SAT, which I'm not a big fan of a lot of the security awareness training out there, because a lot of them, their whole method is basically tease you with a bunch of bad links, teaching you not to click on bad links, which from a psychological perspective and even from a training perspective, as we kind of study this a little bit, it doesn't make the most sense. So I like the more positive reinforcement one that come in, you do some training, you take a test that you really understand the knowledge that you've just been trained on, you get it, and it gives you a little, that a boy or that a girl, it'll give you a little certificate that prints out, and, once every month you get a little test with a new look or maybe one of the latest types of threats and that kind of thing. So big fan of security awareness training, big fan of more positive reinforcement versions of that. But those are EDR and email security and security awareness training. Those are like foundational 101. Everybody has to be doing this.
So someone could interview for you, and then on those things, you're like, interview over.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, well, we'll start there, right? Yeah, exactly.
And how long have you lived in Eugene, Oregon?
My whole life. Yeah, basically.
Can you talk about how the tech startup community is there? What's going on as far as tech startups there?
Yeah, Eugene's a little interesting. We're home at the University of Oregon. And so there's, probably one of the biggest employers in the area, I think, is U of O. I think it's number one or two. So there's influence certainly that it has on the city and community and that kind of thing. And it does have a cybersecurity, program that it's launched in the last 5 years. It's getting better and growing, and they're doing some pretty cool stuff. So we have a few connections over at the U of O that we've worked over the years on different things. But also in the community, there's several software companies, and We also have a IP transfer. So they develop new things, methods, or ideas in business. They have a department that will transfer intellectual property and certain developments over to the business community in partnership, kind of the public, university partnership to launch new things, whether it be, medicine. We have a great, biochem, microbiology program at U of O as well. So there's some kind of cool stuff there. But yeah, Eugene is not really a major hub, if you will, but there is surprisingly quite a few advanced technology companies there with some pretty cool solutions. And a lot of us, at least a handful of the folks that I kind of rub shoulders with around Eugene, are doing more regional and national services.
Is there a college out there that's known for being the mecca or the top as far as cybersecurity degrees?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I don't know if I could sit here and name them all, but I mean, obviously there's a couple of the Ivy Leagues that have made big advancements, particularly in AI. They've got some very advanced things they're doing that's very interesting. But no, I think a lot of your bigger state universities, the University of Washington has a big cyber program, big tech, of course they do. Seattle and greater Washington area being such a tech center, community and a big tech central intelligence hub, if you will. But a lot of them do. Now, I can't really name off my head specific ones, but a lot of, and rightfully so, needed. A lot of the universities, even the community colleges, are putting out a lot of cybersecurity programs and IT programs because there's such a need. There's not enough people to go into IT that we're going to be needing in the future. Now, even though AI is kind of jumping into some of that, we still need a lot of people in IT. So there's another pivot too. Matter of fact, I recently was talking to one of the professors at one of our community colleges, and he was saying a lot of people are going out of the development program, that they were working developer, and they're shifting over to be in the network cybersecurity programs. I think you're going to see a trend.
Do you have any experience or what's your take on the cybersecurity program for the United States military? Someone comes from the military with 6 years experience in cybersecurity. Do you say, okay, 6 years good experience, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, interesting. I've had several military folks work for us. They tend to be great employees. The military, is advanced in some areas or sectors, they in divisions or whatever. They actually do some pretty crazy advanced stuff. That's interesting. So that's pretty respected for the most part. But then kind of the run of the mill, right? Everybody that's just kind of on a team or a group that sets up networks and those kind of things, it tends to be very proceduralized and SOP. So it's a standard operating procedure, and they don't really necessarily have to think a lot for themselves. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we notice there's a bit of a gap. Either you're kind of the real deal and you're in there, you really get it, and you're touching some pretty cool stuff and advanced stuff that the military is doing an awesome job because you're deep in that program, or you're really just kind of a guy that's just following standard operating procedure.
Like one of the group members of the project that's, over on the ride.
Exactly. And they become, because the military, because it's big, they tend to become siloed. So they tend to be really good at voice-over IP. Yeah. And they know a lot about voice-over, but they don't know anything about, Microsoft, DNS and AD, Active Directory systems, that kind of stuff.
So you might be able to answer, how worse the average citizen, how worse the average American citizen be that the U.S. government's going to get hacked by China or Russia, and some random hackers going to hack all the nuclear codes or something, the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah. I don't know if I'd be the best expert to opine on that, but I will say that it's definitely a legitimate worry. It is possible. It's not just a movie. Just like the AI stuff, right? I mean, we all watched AI movies 20 years ago and thought, never. And here we are like, what? Yeah, really robotic that look like humans that do that kind of stuff. So it's crazy what the evolution. But no, it is real. We could potentially, some of our sectors, there's been big initiatives over the last 3 or 4 years to really tighten up a lot of our infrastructure. But when you read about the news that our water systems and our dams, because a lot of it comes down to local municipalities and those kinds of things, there's a lot of weakness out there. A little bit back to the operational technology, because a lot of that's like SCADA systems, which are really antiquated old IT systems and protocols, and they're very easy to hack. Very easy to infiltrate, some code in there to mess with it. So it is a real threat. It's not hyperbole when people are talking about the potential geopolitical implications of cybersecurity. It's real. And
then I might get wrong, but do you have a philosophy that people process technology?
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. And I looked at a little bit in this conversation that, valuing your people, is really important. I think making sure that they're educated and supported and they understand, come back to that leadership security first mindset. I think that's really important on the people side, and more germane to just the tech side of actually my teams and stuff. Yeah, we want to make sure they understand they're trained properly. They understand they've got tools, they got resources. We want to make sure that they understand that we've got a certain methodology and philosophy of how we approach cybersecurity. We're not just a me too. I joke in my book that a fool, a tool is still a fool. And I think that's real. I mean, a lot of people think they're going to get the latest cool tool and then their security's good, or they're scared to go to their boss. And this is a lot in the medium business space, medium enterprise. They really just don't want to go fight the fight in the office because IT, we joke about the CFO and he hears whistling in his office. it's the suck of IT going out the window, right? And so the history there is that IT historically, and we still suffer from this in cybersecurity, is that we tend to be not on time and we tend to be way over budget. And I'll tell you what, some of those scenarios in the government are amazing. Even the last year we were reading about.
I had a funny story for you. I spent some time in the Army, and so everything was down, right? And so we told the IT guy, hey, it's stuff down. This joker told us, go online and fill out a request. Dude, it's down. Well, I can't do anything to go online and request.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, totally. So IT's gotten itself a little bit of a bad reputation because of that kind of thing. But the people first is really important, that you're supporting it. And, from our teams, that they understand philosophy and the approach we have to cybersecurity. And then, of course, processes. I touched on that, right? Even my chapter 3, the efficacy of IT processes. We really believe that, processes matter. And they really can become kind of, in a sense, the ultimate backstop to deliver good IT, uptime, availability, and cybersecurity. So those are really important. They help you do all kinds of benefits, right? Your mean time to repair is much faster. Your mean time to detect is much quicker. And your mean time to repair is, all those are good, right? You're detecting things quicker and you're able to get them resolved because you have good process. You have documentation. You have all the backup that you need to be able to understand how we would, triage something and be able to restore, service to customer, or, make sure that the security threat is eradicated, whatever that might be. So the processes are really important, and particularly change, as I shared, because that's one of the biggest offenders. 70% of failure time is lack of unauthorized, unapproved, untested change. So the process is big. Technology is important too. Again, you don't just want to be the tool, but you want to make sure that you've got a methodology layer that you're approaching it. You're not just shooting from the hip. And so I've alluded to this already a little bit. We know that 70-80% hacks come from the end user. So let's put all our money, time, energy, and effort to fortify the end user access and approach and how to use email, things they touch. And we're also focused on that end user that we left back at, back at base, we've left walls down. And so it's easy for somebody to break. And one of the things when they get inside and they do make a hack, however they get in, whether that's through the front or the back door, there's this thing called east-west traffic, because they're so patient. The wait, and that's a little like following their backups. Inside the network, they're looking for things kind of inside, east to west. What can they go deeper on? What data can they harvest? There's a thing called data, DLP, if you will, is what the acronym is, another acronym, but it's data loss prevention. And so there's tooling that you have in place to really protect that data. Some of the tooling that we use is pretty cool, because not only will it protect data, know exactly what's going on in the network, even what we call shadow IT, which is where people plug in other devices and they're moving things off the network, their own drives. They can work all usually sometimes good intentions, right? The road to help with good intention, but they're putting all their data, out in different places, and it's apart from the corporate network, it's not protected, so it's vulnerable. So DLP, data loss prevention is really important. But one of the cool tools, for example, is that it will encrypt on the fly. So when the data does go off, it's actually going to be automatically encrypted, oddly enough. So there's some pretty cool things that you can do. That east-west traffic, and that's also where microsegmentation comes in. When they're inside, it really protects and lock down the bad actor or threat actor from moving from one side of the network or application or workload to the other application or workload. It can protect and really keep it contained, so they can't basically hack other areas of the network. They're very isolated, and you can shut them down and detect them quicker. So the tooling really does matter, not just your obvious 24/7 SOC services that we provide, not just your, managed detection response, MDR, what we call XDR. We're using SIM, which is a security information event manager. We're logging all the logs. We're looking at parsing the logs for bad behavior. That's kind of back to the red dress, that we're looking for, all the right heuristics and algorithms to detect nefarious activity. Those are all the things. The Matrix, by the way. The movie came back to me, The Matrix. I knew it would come. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing that we work. So full, well thought out, cybersecurity solution stack is really important. The tools matter.
Tell me, how long have you been in business?
Well, in this iteration of IP services, we've been since 2001, so 24 years.
So talk about this. How have you been able to stay in business for so long and being successful, where so many others fail?
Yeah. So in all candor and honesty, it really is about reinventing yourself. That's been the theme. As we started in software, we started doing computer sales, and we started doing some networking sales. So we're reinventing the retail software. And then we started doing some software development stuff. So kind of reinventing ourselves, not going to be all things to all people, not doing everything, but really inventing and focusing on that space to broaden the business. From there, we reinvented into network integration, because we started to stand up a lot of regional networks, wide area networks, rolling out 3Com, which is around anymore, 3Com, Cisco, all that stuff, supporting those networks and doing a variety of different services. So we reinvented in the network integration business, and then out of that, we spun into the MSP business. So we started managing on a contract different services. Security was a subset of that. It wasn't the big thing. So that was a whole genre. And then here the last, 6 years, really, I would even say 4 or 5 years, just about, since coming into COVID and stuff, we really have hyper focused on our cybersecurity solutions, and we lead with that. So we're really leading with a security first mindset on how we approach everything, because a lot of the MSP services that you still need and have to be delivered, they really need to have a security first thought process to them. So we lead with cybersecurity. So that reinvention, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, we're really in our kind of our 5th iteration or reinvention ourselves. And I think that's not always easy to pivot. It's not always easy to do. And there are some, ups and downs, if you will, in terms of business flow, revenue. I mean, there's impacts to the business as you transition, because when you start to shift, you may not have as much energy. You're not focusing on selling that stuff anymore, but you're still ramping more business, more clients in the more pure cyber stuff. So this has been a real part of our evolution.
So each day, how do you decide what to focus on each day?
Well, that's always challenging. I mean, I think everybody kind of has personal methods and philosophies about that. For me, I'm really big on proactive. And so I try to look through the lens of proactive things. So I'm a kind of a calendar Nazi. I put everything in my calendar, and I'm driven by my calendar to the extent that I can. It's not that you can't create some margin for things along the way. Sometimes I even build in margin, right? Proactive research, proactive study. I'm going to write some more, working on an AI book, by the way. Visual Ops AI, imagine that. And it's about half done. But yeah, so I really look through, proactive, prioritization of things. And then I think, we really, my business, really divide, sales, operations, and then the business is what I call it. That's just my little philosophy, if you will. So, sales and marketing are, of course, brother and sister. They're part and parcel together. So I'll spend a certain amount of time on the sales and marketing pieces, make sure that we're on track. And whether it's sales and we're looking at pipeline and all those kinds of things, or if it's marketing, we're looking at how do we take all this great thought leadership and get it out there? Maybe go on some podcasts that are pretty cool. So that kind of marketing stuff that we do. And then, of course, in the operations side, for us, that's our, technical operations center. I have of course, a director of tech ops. And he runs the teams, the security teams and the ops teams. And so making sure that we're following the best practices, that we eat our own dog food. So we have a lot of tooling, if you will, around the processes that we talk about. It's called ITSM, IT Service Management. Our ITIL tools, they're ITIL compliant. So we use a tool that's a service management tool that manages our tickets, our assets, all those kind of things. And then, of course, all the cyber stack tooling that I shared without. And so the operations piece, and then customer satisfaction, delivery, looking at the, the threat landscape, new things that we want to be ahead of, and on top of try to be proactive about those things. I cautiously, talk about, not real openly, but we've really never had a breach. Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty interesting factor. I don't go on and on about that. Because
So after all these years, we're still excited about cybersecurity.
Interesting. It's probably back to the altruistic part a little bit. The reason I, the book is, I really enjoy the idea of helping people, improve their cybersecurity posture and really defending against all the bad actors. I mean, I'm kind of one of those people, there's a lot of things in life that can get to you, but one of my peeves is thievery and stealing and that kind of thing. And that just irks me to no end. And I think it's unfair. And there's so many innocent victims. And even, collateral damage when records are stolen, when they're stolen, medical records, where there's just a lot out there. So there really is an altruistic part about really raising the tide that floats the boats with all companies, small, medium, large enterprises, all having their cybersecurity and really shutting down the bad guys to the extent that we can shut them down. That really excites me. I love that part of it. Then, of course, I'm a business guy. I'm an entrepreneur. So I've started companies, grown several successful companies. So I love that. But cyber, as you can tell, for the stuff I could get involved in, I always kind of gravitate back to the cybersecurity stuff. It's kind of that tech kid in me that loves the
I can tell you kind of keep it like a certain level. I know I see like if you want to geek out, you just geek out, do deep dives, like net ass detail, Like I can imagine like actual cybersecurity podcast, right, where the other guy does with you, like the other stuff you talk about.
Yeah, I really do enjoy the technology itself. And I self-invest maybe a little too much because sometimes that distracts a little bit from the business and growing the business and those kinds of things. But lately, we're in a really good pace. We're in a really great place. I'm thrilled about getting the book out there, the message out there. I'd love for people to read it. Yeah, I'm excited.
So for the book, I wanted someone to read the whole book. They said, "Hey Scott, I can read one chapter." What chapter would they read out of your book?
I'd probably say Chapter 3, that's probably my thing, which is the efficacy of IT processes, because I've alluded to that a lot today, that those are foundational. They apply not only to cybersecurity, but to better IT. So they apply in both cases. I think that's probably the one I would point people to the most, the quickest. But of course, you're probably reading the book because you want to make sure that you've got a good, solid cybersecurity posture. You want to make improvement. Maybe you want to nudge your team. Maybe you want to give a copy to your team. Again, the big book is pretty deep, technical. It's not like, getting down to every little detail, in terms of hands-on, how do you actually program a firewall. But it does get into some methods that, a typical person's like, okay, zero trust. You can see them through and get the concept of zero trust. A lot of what I shared today. I think there's a lot of value in the rest of the book too. But chapter 3.
Why do you think so many people have bought the book or been avid fans of the book?
I think because it's different. We tend to be, the geek side is always looking for that next technology to deploy or implement. Again, we call it the shiny toy effect. It's a little bit the enemy of good IT and cybersecurity. And my version of that is back to I've repeated a couple times, a fool with the tool is still a fool. Like this new shiny toy. Oh, this is going to do this. Oh, that's cool. How do we deploy that? And they get all enamored with it, and we're all, distracted, and we're all hyper-focused and myopic on deploying one new software solution, tool, cybersecurity, whatever it is. And I think that's a problem. I think that's problematic because you have to look at it in layers. You got to step up and look at the big picture, and then you got to be really smart. And we manage by fact, not by belief. There's a lot of research and study around the stuff that I write on. It's not just something that's got made up. It really is backed by research. If you look at my book, you'll see I have crazy amounts of sightings and references in there. Every page is cited and referenced. It's not my opinion, it's fact. And so one tool I can tell you as a fact is not going to solve your cybersecurity posture. It's not going to make it. One alone is not going to do the job.
So how hard or easy is it to publish a book on Amazon? How does the process work?
Yeah, so so I have the IT Process Institute. It's kind of my publishing, partner, house, if you will, that we published our other stuff, and even some of our white papers to that. So we do a fair amount of releasing different things in the ITI. But so we've been through this a little bit. But anymore, it's gotten easier because nowadays, when we kind of have the final manuscript ready to a book, we can actually upload it. The team can upload it into Amazon, and they do print on demand. It's pretty cool. So they can give you a hardback cover, version. They give you a softback cover version. They can, we easily can convert it into a Kindle version as it's available in all those. Actually, I use their AI tool, and we actually made the audio version with their AI tool. So it's pretty simple with Amazon. They're a great, easy, simple way, and most everybody has access to Amazon and can get the material however they want it. Some are visuals, some are listeners, some want a book in their hand. So it's pretty simple.
So the book is a source of revenue for you, or is it more like a sales funnel or like a combination?
Yeah, it's really a combination, but more sales, more credibility as I share more. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, people you wrote a 400-page book on cybersecurity. I mean, you obviously
you want to have no life, right?
You must know something about cybersecurity. You can produce that kind of content over the from that, which a lot of it's from over the years, but. So there's the credibility piece is really important for our marketing and sales, just establishing that we really are, again, we're really coming at this through a very thoughtful, thought leadership approach, looking at the best practices, looking at the best frameworks, thinking about compliance and process, zero trust thinking, these kinds of things are really powerful for the book. And then I think the executive edition, which I'm excited about, really is something, hey, I don't want to get in the geeks and and I appreciate all the other stuff and maybe there's value, but I don't got a little bit of time. I'm not reading a 4-5-page book, but give me a 100-page book and I'll flip through it and take a look. So that's why I produced that book.
Talk about the process of writing your book. Do you write an hour a day? You have outline, just knock it out once? You have how you do that?
Yeah. So earlier, I'm going to sound a little bit counterintuitive to what I said or hypocritical, where I like to be proactive and think the book process is not the way. I woke up 2 nights ago a little bit in a frantic going, wait a second, we need to map all of our security solution services to the CIS top 18 controls. Why I thought of that and why it woke me up in the middle of the night, I have no idea. But I can tell you this, when I got to my computer the next morning, man, the first thing I worked on is how are we going to map the top CIS 18 cybersecurity controls to the service solution that IP Services delivers. So it kind of comes to me in bits and pieces, and when it does, I go write it down. And then at some point, a couple of times I went back and said, okay, are there gaps here? What am I doing? Where am I going with this? There, oddly enough, seems to be a little bit of, rhyme to the rhythm. Of what I'm writing, and it kind of makes sense. And one of the chapters, the last chapter in my book, is called The Golden Thread. And what I do there is I really weave a common, like the needle through the golden thread, right? I'm weaving a needle through all of the chapters and how they build upon each other. Like the first 3 chapters is a little snippet of that. Like if you don't have, leadership tier, and it's important for leadership to understand what they need to do, and they need to take it up the boardroom, but they want to know that you got a philosophy. If you can convince your leadership that there's a philosophical position, kind of what I shared, managed by effect and not by belief, then it's hard to convince or sell upstream to your management that, hey, we just want to add more tools. We actually have a whole methodology, philosophical approach of how we're going to approach this. This is why we need this to be important for the business. And part of that philosophy is that, cyber threats are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Read the news after this. So the philosophy matters, and I get into that. The way that it works, though, is you've got the efficacy of IT processes. So here we go. What are we going to do foundationally in that philosophy? So the fact that we think about IT processes and cybersecurity processes, not just tools, not just methods, that feeds into your philosophy. So it feeds into your philosophy and leadership. Those three play off of each other. Just those first three chapters. So there's a golden thread, right? The leadership wants to know that you know what you're doing. Let's put it in practical terms. And then you've got a method is how you're going to do, why we're going to budget this thing. And what's protecting the business, what's the ROI, right? Does the business going to ask, right? How are we going to get a return on investment on this? Well, you have a philosophy that's going to be able to show that. You're going to be able to demonstrate. Yeah, our philosophy is that breach is happening all the time. And if we don't have this, we could lose millions of dollars, 4% of business to business, right? It's all part of our philosophy. And then we also believe that following best practices and proven frameworks is part of our philosophy. That's really important. And so part of that philosophy is that we believe in the foundational IT processes. And then the third chapter is like, here's the process we care about. And this is what the studies show. That's why I'm citing all the previous studies. Change, config, release, manage, that kind of stuff. So there's a snippet of my golden thread chapters.
So let's suppose a company's with you 3 or 4 years. They've been everything to do, everything's going fine, and they get hacked. What happens then?
So if we're managing their stuff, we will have had a validated nightly report that will have verified that not only was something backed up, but would actually scan for malware, scan for ransomware, and put in a mutable position or point. And then if they're following all of our recommendations and they get hacked, we're going to execute our restoration plan. So we're going to tell the threat actor, the ransomware person or whatever, neener, maybe those words, but we're going to say, yeah, sorry, we're just not going to respond to them. We don't need to respond to them because we actually already know that last night's backup is valid. The 4-hour snapshot is completely valid. It's clean. We know it's immutable and we have a plan. We're going to actually set up a cloud in our data center, one of our cloud systems, or we're going to go to AWS or Azure. And if that's what that company's chosen as their cloud of choice for the restoration point, they may not want to live in the cloud all the time, but in terms of an emergency or some kind of a breach, the cloud immediate option. So within 4 hours, we're going to be back up. Within 8 hours, we're going to be back up. 2 days, whatever it is.
So 4 hours is like an industry standard. That's just your personal company standard.
It really depends on the extent because the more you're snapshotting, the more data it takes, the more throughput resources, all that stuff. So 4 hours, 2 hours. Some people, if you want to do it, some people want real time application, literally like seconds apart. You can do that, but the more you go shorter in terms of recovery period point in time, the more expensive it gets. So most companies are day. I would say that's more the standard. Nightly backups, fully vetted, fully scanned, fully immutable, and then usually within a day to restore. So, and sometimes 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours, day to 2 days. And it's pretty practical. It can be these days with this technology side of stuff that we deliver. It's pretty affordable, actually.
Who are some cybersecurity people out there you look to, or you follow?
Oh man. Well, there's a couple of people. There's one of the evangelists at Zenterra I really like, Nathaniel. I've done some podcasts with him before. Bruce Schneier's interesting. He does a lot of cryptography and that kind of thing. There are a few people out there. There's a couple of unknown people that I really respect. They're tops. Gentleman by the name of Robert Johnson III, who is the president, CEO of SimCore. Mark Allers, SimCore as well. They deliver a solution that we work with that delivers what we call integrity management. It's one of the chapters in my book. And I call it the Holy Grail because a little back to the migration and change, talking about how it's in a well-known working state. If you have the maturity in your processes to where at any point in time your systems are 100% integrous, there are no threats or breaches, that's the perfect state to be in. If you can always manage to that state, it's integrity in all your systems. Integrous. It's not breached. It doesn't have malware. It's not going to get infected, whatever, and you want to protect it. And so by being able to monitor it at that level, if something does happen, your mean time to detect is unbelievable. Seconds, not days, hours, seconds.
So do you have anything going on, like next one, the keynotes or anything you're doing, events you're doing that people should know about?
Yeah, I'm actually on the Sean Kelly podcast, which he's out of Vegas. It's pretty interesting. He's a very broad audience, a little different audience. So that's kind of interesting. I'm excited about that. Next week, I'm going to be out there. I'm sharing on his podcast. And I have a couple of opportunities to share a couple of accounting associations and that they want to bring some cyber people in. So, but working on a few things, but that's the next couple of things I've got up.
Next, can you do like a deep dive on like how they got started, what you're focused on now, and your dream vision for the company is going towards the future?
So you're talking about the company that got started in terms of IP services, so as I've kind of shared, we were really spun out of, our micro business. Looking at top, guys to go to MSC, and of lately, we're going down cybersecurity because everything security first in mindset and all the systems we manage need to have security thought about first. So we lead with the cybersecurity, and that really has been an evolution, quite frankly, as we've kind of tuned and honed our chops. And a lot of it comes back to the thought leadership. We talked about it way before its time. We put a little bit different vernacular and nomenclature on it. the way we talk about things, like even integrity management, we used to talk about that in different terms. So anyway, the point is that we've, I think, always been a little ahead of the curve, delivering kind of what I call tip of the spear solutions, really inventive, leading edge type solutions, just like we were with our thought leadership around IT processes and ITIL, those kinds of things. Even data centers. We built our data center, 24 years ago. There just weren't a lot of data centers out there. So we've been ahead of our time, tip of the spear with those kind of things. So that gets me excited. I love being leading edge. I don't really want to be bleeding edge, as they say. We don't bleed with, not knowing what we're doing, but leading edge solutions, tip of the spear solutions, the forefront of what are the best practices and solution keeping, organizations, businesses secure. The next question was going to where I'm going from here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where we're going from here is really, I think, into hypergrowth. Right now for the company, I'm really focusing and doubling down, triple invest, I don't know what word you want to say, on really just growing and scaling the company. We've got solution pieces in place and partnerships that I believe we're in a position to scale exponentially than we've ever been before. So we're going hard after sales and marketing, really trying to grow that business set, which ultimately is revenue, right? Which ultimately is business, sustainability and profitability. So I'm really drilling down. That's the future. That's right now. Where's it going in the future? I think in the future, interestingly enough, I think it's going AI. So I think, being smart about how we do that, how we approach that, understand where it's at today is really important, because I think there's a lot of misinformation. I don't think people understand the amount of threats, and that's what we'll get into my next book a little bit, but they don't understand the cybersecurity threats that AI opens up. Governance around AI, everybody's, rolling up 3 or 4 different versions of AI. They're putting all kinds of personal information, business information, documents they're uploading, and people don't realize how accessible some of that information could be. If you're doing paid versions on some of these platforms that are quote unquote freemium, they're supposed to be doing security, but there's been a lot of news and a few briefs that come out that they're not as secure as they said they are, because they're so intensive on resources, and so they aren't really protecting it at the level that they say they are. I'm not going to call anybody out, but there's some interesting stories about how accessible certain data is once been loaded into the AI tools of late. So that's what everybody and their dog and their frog seems to have some kind of an AI tool to spin on it too. I think that's going to consolidate a little bit to where people are going to go more like, I don't want 6 tools to do different things to do it better. I want 2 tools or 1 tool that I can. And there you already see ChatGPT 5 going there a little bit. We're going to do more stuff like infographics and stuff. We used to have to use Canva or something else. So it's getting better at that stuff. But anyway, my next really is, I think it's AI. It's the future. I think figuring out how to protect organizations from the threat that AI exposes and represents into a company is going to be really important going in the future. And governing it, having the ability. We have a partnership that actually will allow you to go out and do a score and say, oh, you have all these AIs deployed in your network, in a more enterprise 1,000-person network. And by the way, your score is 62% of how people are putting data into that, and it actually lock down and control which GPTs they can use or not use, that kind of thing. So those are some of the tools in the future that we're deploying to have deep expertise in, but then also just consulting on how you deploy AI into your organization, not from a practical developer perspective, like I'm going to solve this business problem by deploying an AI technology. That's awesome. That's going on. That is going on right now. We've even talked about that a little bit. But I think from the cybersecurity perspective, you're going to deploy this and it's going to help this more efficient and help your user, but what threat does it open up? Does it open up a threat? And how are we going to secure that threat? And if it does open up a threat and we can secure it, how do we govern how it's used? Because people could there will be iteration of AI, taking AI and doing nefarious things with it that you wouldn't even think was imaginable. And the best example of that is I've read some stories about ChatGPT where you can quote unquote jailbreak it by certain prompts. Supposedly it won't do certain things it won't tell you, like bad things, like, how you're going to hack something or how you're going to, do some evil thing, right? And apparently there are some prompts that help. So even you can't trust the large language models themselves to completely govern themselves. Even though they're saying they're doing it, there's some interesting stuff out there. It's not, that could be problematic for a business. So you can imagine.
So for your hypergrowth, you focus on, right? Are you target certain industries? And if you do,
Yes.
how do you decide what industries to target?
Yeah, it's very good. We tend to, as you can tell, because of the things I've shared in the thought leadership and the compliance, we take after industries that have some level of regulation. So healthcare is a big growth tip for us. Work with a lot of healthcare right now. The other is manufacturing, as I kind of share a little bit about that, because most of them have NIST standards. They're stuff with the state or with the Fed particularly. They have to have those National Institute of Security standards in place, and a lot of those are the layers of security that we provide. So that's big. Manufacturing is big, for us, a big target. And then the operational technology I was sharing, not only challenging in healthcare, that's particularly challenging in manufacturing. So those are 2. And then the other one is fintech or financial services. Not really banks and credit unions. We have banks and credit unions as our clients, but we really focusing on people that are delivering finance. The only reason we're staying away from a little bit is because a lot of those organizations, as they scale, as the community bank, and they're all get sold by big boys, so the big companies all want their own teams, their own cyber, so there's not as much opportunity in that space for it. I'm not seeing and don't really want to chase that. But there is a ton of financial, advisors, a bunch of financial investment firms, accounting firms, CPA firms. They're all, a lot of them looked, a lot of companies, maybe they look to CPA firms for a lot of that advice and input, and they're just not really up to speed. I took a little bit in my one book, the Executive Companion, that, you're a candy shop, make candy, make awesome candy. You're not a 24/7 security operations center cybersecurity company. Why are you trying to be one? You hired 2 guys and you expect them to be experts, and then you only got 2 guys. If one gets sick, maybe you got one left. Maybe he's not as smart as the other guy. He's on vacation. One of them quits. With us, you can subscribe to the best practice services, and you get a whole team.
Is there anything I want to say about your book?
Yeah, we're wrapping up. I would say, my book available on Amazon in all those forms I shared earlier, Kindle, audio, that kind of thing. Love for you to go buy it, download it, read it, order it, write a review on it. I appreciate that. The other thing is the Executive Companion. I have a couple of offers for your listenership I'd like to share. One of them is the Executive Companion that we put out there is for, I think, $17.95 on Amazon. You text me, and I'll give you the number here in a little bit, and my team will get an e-copy out to you, no charge. It'll be my complimentary version to you for listening to me today and being a part of this podcast. The other thing I'd like to open up, this one's a pretty big offer. I'm just doing this for a few of the particular things, podcast and appearances that I'm doing, is I'm going to open up my Pen Level 1 testing service that we do. It's through a third party, so we're not coming expose a bunch of bad stuff and say we're the guys to fix it. We're going to look real through the third-party Galactic partners. Their 10-1 scan is pretty exhaustive. It's only going to sample a portion of your network. It's non-invasive. I'd like to open up the pen test for you. I definitely need to talk. My team need to talk to make sure to qualify, but it'd be no cost, and you'll pay $7,000 for this pen test. You can go Google right now if you want. Go look what the pen test cost. You'll see it's expensive. But I'm doing that to just really raise the tide that floats the boats. And then, of course, there's gaps on the holes. I'd love to talk to you about it as well. So here's how you do that. If you want the Executive Companion book and you like to explore the potential of doing a penetration test, text me at 541-359-1269. Again, 541-359-1269. You can just put the words like secure 25. My team will get back to you and we'll get you all set up.
Thank you, Scott. That's really nice of you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Scott, can you tell us how some people reach out to you besides your text?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Any questions you have, my author's website's the easiest. You can link to my companies and the ITPF there. So that's my full name. The trick part of my name is 2 L's. So it's Scott Alldridge, SCOTTALLDRIDGE.
Yeah, I told you know how to go back and double check.
Yeah, ALLDRIDGE. You can also Google my name on internet and be shocked if my SE is not working. I think you put Visible Ops, Scott Alldridge, or anything like that in there, I'm going to pop right to the top of the list. Some other appearances and other thought leadership stuff I've done.
So, Scott, is there anything else I asked you that I haven't asked yet, or anything else you want to talk about?
Not really. I think I've covered it all. I think one thing, I hit on a little bit was the insurance thing, a little bit the fallacy of that. And I think that's an important takeaway for people is, if you think you're just relying on your cyber insurance again, it's, that's one thing that is really sad because people are sitting back and think that they're covered. And even some insurance companies out there are kind of out there talking about how they will do some scanning vulnerability and that they're doing some security looks at your network, almost a false sense of security. But what they're really doing is really not of value. It's really not protecting you. So don't be fooled by a lot of the misinformation in cybersecurity insurance out there these days. It's pretty tricky.
Scott, you get a lot of value. Before we get out of here, can you give us any wisdom or advice on anything you want to talk about?
Wow, open mic. Whenever I want to say, well, I think, in general, probably the thing I would encourage people to do is to, really, and I've kind of used the idiom a lot, but more made by fact, not by belief. There's a lot of people out there that are being told from their IT team and stuff, we're good, we got to cover, well, no, we just deployed that new tool, so man, we're really good with our cyber. We're as solid as we've ever been. I think there's a lot of misinformation. It's kind of the old adage, trust but verify. When your team is telling you that they've got it all covered, do they really have it all covered? How do you know, right? So hope is not a strategy. Trust is not a strategy. Believe it or not, you need to verify. And matter of fact, that ties right back into my pen test. Because if nothing else, you can take great value that it gives you, and you can go share that with your team and plug any vulnerabilities or holes that it finds. I really want organizations to be safe.
God, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Really appreciate being on today.
And to listeners, thank you for your time as well. Remember to be great every day.